Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and today we're talking politics. We're talking North Idaho, specifically Kootenai County Sheriff's race, and the unaffiliated contestant in that race is with us today. He is Mike Bauer. Mike,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Let us begin by a little bit of background. You are a career law enforcement guy. Have quite a large resume in this business, especially down in Southern California.
Right. I left the job some time ago, but I came out of retirement for this sheriff's race. I was a member of the LA County Sheriff's Department when I was 19 years old. January 1st, 1969, I joined. I worked in the jail. I became a deputy on my 21st birthday. Went to the academy. I was first in my class when I graduated. I went straight to patrol, worked the press office after that patrol assignment, promoted to sergeant at age 25, one of the youngest sergeants on our department. And then I worked special investigations or intelligence for the next 10 years. And that was organized crime, that was subversives, that was the what you would call the groups that were causing disturbances in that era were pretty active, starting to feel that way again. And one of the groups was the Aryan Nation, actually, which was kind of coincidentally something we were aware of at the time Butler was up here doing his. And one of the reasons was because he was from Palmdale, Antelope Valley, which was our jurisdiction, so we knew other people that were similarly had similar viewpoints, and we were kind of watching them closely. We also had Jewish Defense League. We had Nazi groups and that down in Los Angeles. There was quite a bit of activity in those days. When I left that job, I was promoted to lieutenant and worked in custody. I worked at Sybil Brand, the women's jail, before it was closed. That was quite an interesting assignment. And then I was inmate services lieutenant in charge of the jail stores, jail services for inmates. I managed the Inmate Welfare Commission, which authorizes expenditure of profits from the jail store and the telephone systems. From that job, I went to be the operations lieutenant at the Inmate Reception Center, and I was working there during the LA riots, where we had pretty close to 27,000 people in custody at that time. Following that, I had a chief's aide job. I was promoted to captain. Oh, there was one other job in there that's important. I was one of the founding members of the Risk Management Bureau, which was a project we had to try to reduce claims and lawsuits so the taxpayers didn't have to pay so much money. And we responded out to the field, and we got intervened in situations which may likely have turned into a lawsuit in the courts, and cost us a lot of money. So that was a pretty important job. I was promoted to captain, and my first assignment was Special Enforcement Bureau. Special Enforcement Bureau is the SWAT teams, the K-9, our horse patrols, and Air 5 paramedic program, which was our mountain rescue program. One of the few law enforcement paramedic programs. In that job, I was also appointed by the LA County Board of Supervisors as a EMS commissioner, Emergency Medical Services Commission. Recommended policy to the board and the health department on paramedic training, paramedic policies, and then I was, before I left the job, I was the chairman of that commission, chair of the LA County EMS Commission. Following the Special Enforcement Bureau job, and coincidentally, I was also in joint command with the Aero Bureau. I just met some fellows online who were LAPD helicopter pilots, wanted to know about that. I told them,
You're a pilot yourself.
I'm a private pilot.
And
I'm
an
a
aircraft
life member of the Experimental Aircraft Association. I've built an RV-6 aluminum 180 horsepower, quite an airplane, and I had it for a number of years, and I sold it to a crop duster down near Moscow. But Aero Bureau was an assignment that I'm kind of proud of, because we had a 3-year record of no accidents, no injuries to anybody on there, and that's in air service, that's pretty hard. And this area here is probably conducive to some sort of future air service operation, which I would be looking at. when I left there, I was captain of the what's called Major Crimes Bureau. That was our organized crime. It was vice, gambling enforcement, and Asian organized crime. And at the time, that was pretty active out in the San Gabriel Valley. We had a lot of problems with Asian organized crime. Following that job, I moved to Mammoth Lakes. I built a house in the Bluffs up in Mammoth, got a huge property tax bill in California, and moved to Montana. My wife Joanne and I moved to Trout Creek, Montana, bought a 182-acre hay farm. And I cut hay for 9 years till I couldn't do it anymore. So it's hard work. It's honest work. And then we moved to Harrison, Idaho about 9 years ago. And this is our 10th winter coming up in the state of Idaho. Previous to that, I had hunted in Idaho for many years. My grandmother and grandfather always set up an elk camp, usually in the Clearwater Forest. After that, we were more near Pierce in the lowland because my grandmother couldn't ride horses anymore. We took horses in, and I learned how to pack. And I really got an appreciation for rural Idaho, for the the beauty of the state, and so I then eventually ended up in Harrison near Carlin Bay, and I coincidentally acquired the S brand from my uncle, who was a brand inspector in Lewiston, Johnny Spurline. So I have his S brand. Look forward to donating that to the Sheriff's Department because I think it's appropriate that they have the S brand, straight S. And that card is on my website, MikeBauerForSheriff.com, under the gallery section. Anybody can take a look at that if they want.
So there's no question that you have an extensive background in law enforcement, not only in law enforcement, but in a variety of different areas in law enforcement, as well as management responsibilities in which you excelled in that period of time. So
That's
then you
correct.
retired, you went to Montana, you came down. Now, what brought you out of retirement to run for sheriff? I mean, that was a full career.
In my 9 years here, I watched Sheriff Ben Wolfinger, and Under Sheriff Dan Matos. I watched their operation. I was very satisfied with the way it was going. And when they announced that they were going to retire, I started looking real close as to who was going to be my next sheriff. I'm a citizen of the county. I'm very interested as a retired law enforcement person. There's many law enforcement retirees here in Idaho, and of course over here in Spokane. But I started looking closely. I became uncomfortable with the field. The field was a very unusual field of candidates with a variety of experience, some with hardly any. And in fact, now we end up in the general election with my experience, with my primary opponent's experience, Bob, and then a third candidate who has no law enforcement experience, and we're going to battle it out on November 3rd. And as I looked at the field, I made a decision that I would file independent, 50-year Republican. I would file independent for the first time in my life. And it was a hard thing to do. But as I look closer, it was meaningful to me to do it because I was concerned who was going to come out of the Republican primary. I did not want to get in the Republican primary and split it further. At one time there was 6, it went to 5, ended up at 4. When I was looking at it at the time I was going to file, I had to make a choice: don't file or file. I decided to file. I held that place after the election. The primary election, I looked at who the candidates were, I looked at the qualifications, and I said, you know what, I'm the most qualified, far and away. I have the energy, I have the interest. I know a lot about what's going on in the county right now because I've been involved in land use and various zoning and planning issues over the last 9 years. I'm beginning to understand, sort of, the politics of the area, which was a really complex issue, and I thought, you know, I'm gonna take it to November. I'm going to take it to November. Now, that was in part due to my dissatisfaction with what I thought was the resume of my primary opponent. It was also due to the fact that I knew that I had the most experience and that I believed I could, what I would call, reset the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department in a way that will put them forward and keep them out of trouble, and also let them develop professionally in a slightly different way than the model I think that they would get with another candidate.
Now, some would say that outsiders, and you're an outsider, need not apply. There has been in many departments around the country, and this is in Kootenai County, there's no exception, a certain understanding, if you will, that certain individuals succeed other individuals and that sort of thing, and that there's a sort of an heir apparency and a network, good old boys network it's called by some. Are you concerned that exists in the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office?
I think it has to exist right now. I think it's just caused by the events that have occurred. Ben Wolfinger's done 2 terms, and prior to him, the previous sheriff had a certain following, and it has naturally progressed to a state where, with Ben leaving and us being the qualified candidates to take that job, we're facing a system inside the organization that's probably going to need to reset itself. There are some leaders inside the department that I understand are doing a great job. There are others that perhaps maybe are a little too interested in politics, and maybe we need to talk about that if I win this race. I'd like to pull politics out of it. If you say good old boys, I think you're talking about a kind of a closed shop where decisions maybe aren't made in the best interest of the public, but maybe have a little bit of a personal influence involved in those decisions for personal various people have a lot to gain and a lot to lose when a new sheriff comes in. It's very common, especially I've heard in Idaho, southern Idaho more, where a new sheriff comes in and people are basically invited to leave. Now, that's not my intention to make anybody leave. My intention is to look at the policies, find out where accountability needs to be improved, and then invite people to stay, follow my lead, accept my leadership, or find another opportunities. A lot of opportunities in this region.
If you should win, do you expect to encounter some resistance from within the department, from within the culture of the sheriff's office?
The resistance I see right now, yeah, there's going to be some. I think most people will settle down pretty quick once they get to know me. The concern I have is that they don't know me. They don't know what kind of person I am. I'm not, when I say I don't want a hostile work environment in the department, I don't mean I'm going to punish anybody. I mean, be nice to each other and respectful, and don't be insubordinate to your supervisors. That's all I mean. But some people misinterpret that and see it as a threat. Who is this Bauer guy? What's he doing here? And why does he want to take over our organization? I want to lead the organization, and I want to make sure that it conforms to what I would consider to be ethical and humane law enforcement practices that I've learned in my experience, and I've come to respect as the right thing to do. So I think there'll be some problems. There's a Deputy Sheriff's Association, which has been historically more of a social support group, more of a quality issue group that has become very political. They know I'm upset with them because they formed a PAC for the first time in their existence. I think they came in the 50s or somewhere 60s. They've never done this before. They formed a political action committee. They took money from some local business people, and they put $15,000 in the PAC. And when I looked at it, I said, well, what do they intend to do with this political action committee? Well, it's obviously that they endorsed a candidate, not me, and they intend to use that to make sure that person wins. Because of my general dissatisfaction with that package of that candidate, it's gotten a little contentious, I think, and I sense some hard feelings. I'll give you an example. Some people I know set one of my campaign signs up in their yard. A police car came by. The police officer slowed down, looked at them, and shook his head disapprovingly of my sign. Well, this indicates to me that there's some sort of a groundswell of maybe people that are concerned, what is this guy doing and why isn't he going along with what the Deputy Sheriff's Association wants? And I'm just here to tell you that if everybody wants something, take a good hard look at why. And I'm telling you, they won't get a more supportive advocate for their working conditions, for their safety, for their equipment, for their pay, for their benefits than me advocating for them. And in a right-to-work state, we don't have collective bargaining here. I don't know if we'll ever have it, but the Deputy Sheriff's Association is too political, in my opinion, and I'd have some discussions with them about that if I win.
Let's talk about also perspective. You spoke in some of the materials that you have on your website and elsewhere about having a rural perspective, about appreciating people in the county who are not in the urban concentrations and populations, but have certain expectations that very often don't seem to be satisfied by the organization itself. Talk a little bit more about what you mean there.
Well, I've been almost 20 years out of the LA basin. I was born in Taft, raised in Bakersfield, which is pretty rural in those days. And then I did my professional work mostly in Southern California in the basin. But during that entire time, I was visiting, hunting for 3 weeks at a time in Idaho. I was meeting a lot of people up here, and I kind of got to understand a little about what people up here want. And when I moved almost 20 years ago to Montana, I really got immersed in what is the rural lifestyle, horses, goats, hay farming, just regular country folks, and they are a special breed of people. They don't feel comfortable, I don't think, with a fresh city person moving in here and taking this job. I'm not that person. I'm a person that has had the city yanked out of me mainly by, well, Gene Arnold and some other sheriffs in Sanders County. You know, I watched them work, and I don't have the city attitude. What I have an attitude is that if you move here from the city and you expect a city-type policing, and that's aggressive policing and strict enforcement, and you. I don't really support that so much as I do helping people. You know, I expect my people to pull over and help somebody if they have a flat tire. I expect them to talk to people on a very friendly basis, just like people should talk to each other. And in the city, you know, you don't stare at anybody. There's a lot of intimidations, a lot of fear. And I expect my people to be mature adults, and I'm sure they are. And I expect them to treat people humanely and in a friendly, open way. I think that's almost more of a rural type of thing, although community policing in the cities tries to approximate that, but there's a lot of pressures that cause them problems that we don't have here.
Additionally, though, you have a department that, and virtually this is true of almost all sheriff's departments in states that are largely rural, and great distances between communities and that sort of a thing. The percentage of officers per thousand in population in North Idaho is less than ideal. You don't have very many deputies on duty particularly in the nighttime hours, where much crime takes place, if it's going to, and that's always been a problem. And there doesn't seem to be, or hasn't seemed to be, any kind of a solution. Can you bring something fresh to that discussion?
Sure. Let's look at our population first. In Kootenai County, I think they said 169 to 189,000. I don't know the exact figure. It's under 200,000 in the county right now. In the state of Idaho, there's 1.8 million. In the state of Montana, there's 1 million. In LA County alone, where I came from and where Bob came from, there's 10 million people. The scale of the population here is way different. And when I look at the needs of this county as a sheriff, I see that City of Coeur d'Alene has a police department, Rathdrum has a police department, Post Falls has a police department, and the sheriff, with various contracts, takes care of the rest of it. So there's 200,000, less than 200,000 population being served by other law enforcement leaders, and who are not under my influence. They're under their city management situations. So when I look at the staffing levels, I have to look at it from the area that is within my reporting district areas. And I don't know if it's exactly correct now. I don't know if it needs to be adjusted. I can tell you this, Chris Felios, Duncan, and Phil Brooks don't have a lot of money to give me to increase staffing. What I can do, and I promise to do, is make sure my recruitment people have a waiting list of employees, and I don't turn back $500,000-600,000 a year like poor Ben Wolfinger had to do to the BOCC to be redeployed somewhere else, usually planning. That money is spent fully by having a complete TO, table of organization of personnel. That's something that can be improved almost immediately by going out and doing the recruiting. We've got a lot of people, I think, that are dissatisfied with what's going on in the rest of the country who would want to come here. We also have some young people that could be recruited out of college that maybe aren't finding the career they thought they were going to have, who are from here, natives of Idaho, or local people from Idaho that were there, whose family brought them here when they were young, who would be excellent deputies and who also maybe have a feel for the more of the Idaho approach to this, rather than focusing on lateral transfers in from out of state from the larger cities. And that brings with it a certain cultural, law enforcement cultural attributes which I think need a close monitoring by supervision to make sure that the training that was done for these laterals somewhere else is consistent with what I want here.
What about retention of deputies? There are other agencies in nearby Washington State, the city of Spokane, for example, which essentially allows other counties, smaller counties, to train and to prepare the best and the brightest, and then because they're able to offer a better paycheck, they essentially rip them away, and that's been a problem for Kootenai County. How do you deal with that?
Well, I look at it this way. I think the relationship between the employees of the Sheriff's Department and the leadership of the Sheriff's Department and the county government in payroll and in benefits and in just basic job satisfaction, which affects retention, is like a marriage. It's not always what you think it is that causes a separation. If people are happy in this relationship, they're going to stay. They'll take a little less pay if they're satisfied, if they're proud of their job, if they're proud of the work they do, if they're properly rewarded for what they do, if they feel they're valued by their leadership and by the community, they're going to stay. If they have the best equipment, if they have the finest weaponry to deal with some of the populations we have out there that appear most likely to outgun us, if we have the proper tactics, if we are doing what we need to do to make our officers and our civilian employees all safe here, then they're not going to leave. They're going to want to work here. I want to create an environment in which they are proud to work here, and then if they're going to leave for a few dollars, most likely that's probably not the problem. The problem may be leadership, it may be workplace culture, it may be let's say the peer group pressure, there may be other issues which you always look at in a separation interview when someone leaves to try to find out what you did wrong. But like in a divorce, sometimes you never really get to the truth of it.
In terms of attitudes toward the police, we're seeing all kinds of things happening. This has been a rather difficult year for law enforcement agencies, the defunding the police concepts, all of the anti-police rhetoric among people who are demonstrating and rioting in streets and what have you. We don't seem to have that as much, or even nearly as much, in Idaho as we do in other communities. But officers are aware of the fact that there seems to be this shifting attitude where respect and admiration existed at one time. There is suspicion and perhaps even contempt at the present time in some of these communities. Is that being felt here?
Well, that came to me in a different way with a question of how do you feel about the law enforcement being defunded? Do you think that is appropriate? And And when we talk about the community's attitude towards law enforcement, as a sheriff, I mean, obviously, I'm not responsible for, well, I'm responsible for the county, but I'm not effectively managing the city police departments and how they do their job, other than working with their chiefs of police to try to have a common philosophy that works in this area. But the public satisfaction with our officers and with our operation, which then moves into whether or not they would be willing to give us extra funding for equipment and for various pay increases and that sort of thing. That's based on the public believing that we're doing a good job, that we can handle the job, that they have confidence that we have the skills, and we will be willing to defend them, and they don't have to defend themselves. Sherman Avenue and the controversies over armed counter demonstrations, what I like to call it, implied to me that there was maybe an attitude among a certain population in Kootenai County that the law enforcement maybe needed help or could not do the job. And I just want to make the case that, yes, we'll do the job. We will protect you. We'll protect your rights, and we'll protect you. And I don't want people to have to put their own personal selves at risk to go out and try to protect the community when they're not compensated for it, and it does cause various issues of liability for them personally and for their families. So I think the community support is gained by school resource officers with the younger people, the officers on the street maybe giving just slightly more warnings than citations, being not too strict or too, let's say, not having a punishing attitude, but having a training and a teaching attitude to the public on what the law requires and what we expect of them. We're not the courts. We're not the punishment arm. We're not tax collectors. Our job is public safety, keeping the peace. We are peace officers. The sheriff's office is structured to keep the peace in the community, and that doesn't necessarily mean being overly aggressive with the population. And I look at that when I get on the job by looking at the commendations and looking at the complaints and finding out what people have been complaining about here. And if there's not any complaints, I'm going to want to know why. There's always complaints. We need a healthy complaint system, which helps me and my management team evaluate what the public thinks about us. We don't turn away complaints, we welcome them. If you have a problem, you have a critique, or you have a recommendation, a suggestion, put it in a complaint form or put it in a suggestion form and tell us what you would want us to do. And if we can legally do it and it makes sense, then of course we'll take a look at it. And the community satisfaction with the organization is the key to public support for law enforcement regionally. And it's an ongoing project. It's something that has to be looked at every day. So
we're nearly running out of time here, so very quick, a couple of questions,
Sure.
of quick answers, if you would, quick answers.
Okay.
First of all, there is in the news just in the last 24 hours, a number of lawmakers who are seeking to have the mandated mask wearing rescinded in the Panhandle Health District, which includes Kootenai County. Law enforcement agencies in those 5 counties that are involved in that have said that essentially they can't enforce it. It's an unenforceable thing. Where do you stand?
Well, I've said that the public health system's responsible for this, managing this pandemic. The governor has issued some orders for various levels of the health district handling this. My concern has been that the health department, Panhandle Health, and other health authorities could have and maybe should have had enforcement in their planning for anything like this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, I believe. I hope it is. I pray it is. but the health authorities, public health authorities responsible for this. Law enforcement gets a lot of things dumped in their lap. And law enforcement, in this particular case, is put at risk if they're out enforcing mask mandates because of the lack of training and the lack of equipment, and also the potential for exposure to people not wearing masks is going to be a problem. And I don't want that disease getting into the workplace and cutting our staff.
Okay, you're running as an unaffiliated, i.e. no party connection. Specifically, how do people get in touch with your campaign to learn more?
Go to MikeBauerForSheriff.com. You can also go to Mike Bauer. You can just Google search Mike Bauer and get onto my Facebook page. I have a lot of information on the Facebook page, but MikeBauerForSheriff.com has just a huge amount of information. There's all my policy statements about the Idaho Patient Act, about various other things that I've gotten involved in. Predatory debt collection is a concern of mine. Various other issues of policy are in there, and I welcome you to see it. I also have a great gallery with a lot of pictures which you find entertaining, and I hope everybody enjoys those pictures in there. MikeBauerForSheriff.com is what I would recommend first, and if you can donate $5 or $2, please do. We're running to 30 days now. We want to get our word out as best we can. I really appreciate the Spokane Talks having me on here today.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, Mike Bauer for Sheriff, Kootenai County. That's all the time we have for this edition of Let's Talk. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and we thank you for watching.